This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.
I'm here with Mariam Bilrami and Imad Asad to interview Mrs. Abeeda Abidi at her house on the 29th of August.
Sorry, it's Abeeda Abidi.
Abeeda Abidi, sorry. At her house on the 29th of August 2008.
Your question.
Do I have permission to record?
Yes, yes.
Okay. One of the things you told us was that one of the most significant events that you experienced was Qaid Azam's death. So can you tell us something about that?
Well, you see, the thing is, we knew that he was in Ziyarat and he was not well because the whole cabinet had gone there. Whatever cabinet, I think Liaquat Ali Khan was there, and of course, Miss Jinnah was with him all the time. And Abdul Nishtar, this is what we heard. And he was in Ziyarat, and he died there. They say he died on the way, but he died in Ziyarat. And then he was brought to the Maripur airport. And from there, he was shifted to the Governor General's house. Because one, that he was not able to, pass any constitution. Because he lived on the times were such that we were, the government and everyone was making do with things. You know, there was, we got a truncated Pakistan, a truncated army, no ammunition, nothing in the offices. So much so, I'm diverging from there. So, it was so bad that we as young girls had to, those of us in PWNG, which I'll talk about later, we were, some of the women, in PWNG, there were all sorts of women, starting from the Masi class right up to the society ladies. Everyone was working for refugees who were coming in. So these women, and when we joined PWNG, then, these women who couldn't read and write, they were asked to heat open the envelopes and turn them inside out so that they could be used. And we used the acacia thorns as pins. So it was that bad. Anyhow, coming back to Qaid Azam death, the whole country was in a gloom, and he was brought from Maripur to the Governor General's house. Then, of course, there was this huge procession. The whole of Karachi was there. And he was, then first, of course, very quickly, the site had to be decided. It had to be a prominent and permanent site. And then this place was near Jacob Lines, this Lines area near Guru Mandir. That was selected by Mr. Hashim Raza, who was the commissioner. No, Mr. Naqvi was the commissioner and Mr. Hashim Raza was the administrator. So he went and chose this. He stood there and saw that, all the Bandar Road and everything was below. And you could see it from there. So the site was, and then of course the procession went, and we thought that it was the end of the world. Now, the interesting, we were in Pindi. The interesting thing in it was that the village women were crying and howling, and how they do the bands. You know what ban is? Yeah. So, and one of the women turned around and she said, "Hi, Qaid Azam mar gaya." So the other one turned around and she says, "Qaid Azam mar bhi gaya, to Muslim League to ji rahi hai." They thought Pakistan, Miss Jinnah was Muslim League. They used to call her Muslim League, because she was the ladies. But to them it was just, that if the Qaid Azam has gone, at least Muslim League is alive, she is going to lead the nation. And that was one. And then in 51, it was 51, it was Liaquat Ali's death. And that Nimra happened to be right opposite our house. It was called Company Bagh. And it was a big, not a very well kept or well-developed park, but it was a huge place with semi-alpine trees, very long trees. And there was, all the political rallies and everything used to take place, because this was the only ground which was large enough to hold many people. So he was there, and he came onto the stage, and my cousin, Nasir Haider, was standing just he was leaning against the stage. And when he was shot, and he came running into a house. In fact, we had to close the house. We were outside, and everyone who ran from there, because it was a very, very panicky moment. So many people just came into our house to protect themselves. So my cousin came running and screaming and crying. And he said, unko Liaqat Ali ko maar diya. So my father put his hand on his mouth and he said, don't say this. Because you see, it could have created panic. But after a little while, we saw the ambulance come and take his body away. So then he was taken to the civilian military hospital. And I think he died he must have died on the way. So that was another blow. Then the third one was, I was thinking last night, the partition of Bangladesh. In 71, it was, in my house at least, it was like, you don't know what Muharram is, but it was like Ashura, the 10th of Muharram. All of us were crying and howling, and we just didn't know what was going to happen. Especially when we saw, because television had come by that time, and we saw the flag being lowered on East Pakistan. Even now it brings, I can't talk about it. It was terrible. And this General Niazi, giving his arms to Manik Shah. It was the worst possible moment in our lives. And of course, that was the time when even till very late, I told Mariam that day that, even in the house, if there was this Pakistan flag, if some dignitary was addressing, or the president was, or Governor General was addressing the nation, so he had to, before that, after that, they had to be the Pakistan flag and, of course, the anthem. And all the children, and after all my children were told that you have to stand up to attention. This was till 80s, till they start going to college. They had to stand up. Even in the house. And of course in the cinemas, when there were pictures were showing, everyone stood up. And of course it gave you goosebumps the moment the national anthem was played and the flag was flown shown flying across. So these were the three very, very traumatic experiences that I went and my family went through. Before that, as I was telling Mariam, the partition itself was not so traumatic, as we personally did not suffer. We were, to begin with, young, full of enthusiasm, and then looking forward to something which was being done, I heard, because, two young girls, about 15, 17, we don't know yet what happened to them. They were from my extended families, distant cousins, and they had a brother. All the three, we do have no idea what happened to them. So they were not in Banur, as I told Mariam, that we come from Banur. They were not in Banur. They were in Patiala city itself, which was full of Sikhs. It was a Sikh state. So we still don't know what happened to them. That was about the closest that we came to a tragedy. Otherwise, everyone reached safely. Our family in Banur, which is my family home, they came to the Ambala refugee camp. 2 or 3 old people died there. And then, of course, the people who had relatives brought these big army convoys and rescued them back to Pakistan. And in Pakistan, there was a big refugee camp made near, it used to be called Walton Airport. So near that, there was a big refugee camp where all the refugees coming from India had to stay till they found their places. And then we came to Pindi, of course, and then, since there no colleges and schools were operating at that time, so my father wanted us to join some sort of an organization. There was a lot of work to be done. So we as young girls, we went and joined Muslim League first, where we used to, I told Mariam, I think I shouldn't repeat it.
We love it.
You think so? All right, then what we did was, you see, it was a quite sort of, it was all extempore. You know, things had to be done as was needed. There was no structure. So what it came to was that the refugees went to the deputy commissioner's house, where they were given ration cards with the numbers of all their dependents. And with that ration card, they came to us, which was Baitul Mal, and all the women were working there. And where we collected all the necessary things were from the Hindu and Sikh houses that had been sealed after they went away. And this was done under the supervision of two policemen and a clerk from the deputy commissioner's office, who made a list of all the things that we needed. I mean, the seal was broken, and with the policeman and one elderly woman, we went in and got whatever we wanted, like, pots and pans and beddings and clothes and pies or whatever was we could get from there. And that was all noted down in a ledger, and it was taken to the Baitul Mal. And there these women brought their ration cards, and we gave them the things according to their needs. Whatever little we could, we did it. So then eventually, things, the refugees started petering out. In the meanwhile, the Kashmir war started. So, and people started, refugees from Kashmir started pouring. And there was no nursing, very few doctors. So we joined, Begum Rana Liaquat Ali Khan formed this Pakistan Women's National Guard, who were basically meant to take over the work of the men so that they could go to the border. Whatever women and girls could do, office work, dispatch riders, Morse code, that was called cipher at that time. So, and then, we were taught given crash courses in shorthand and typewriting, which of course you don't know now. I think you have computer, all right. There used to be shorthand and typewriting. Shorthand was a very special language that you had to learn. So we were given crash courses in that. Then we were given crash courses in nursing, first aid. So, I mean, whatever could be encapsulated into a month or so. And then we were sent out into the field. And after the refugees were not taken care of completely, but they were less now. The need was more in Va, where the ordnance factory is now. There used to be military barracks, and all these people were accommodated there. So, and out of those military barracks, they took about 3 or 4 and made it into a hospital, where there were just about 2 doctors. And then all the Women's National Guard, we used to leave house at 6 o'clock in the morning, come back at 6 in the evening. And the whole day we had to be there looking after those refugees. And then, of course, some of the local philanthropists, they brought cauldrons of food, distributed it there. Clothes were distributed. I don't know where they came from, but they were taken care of. So we had to be there looking after because there was this typhus fever on. And I hate saying it, but Kashmiris are quite immune to being dirty. I mean, they don't bathe. So we had to open their hair, and which was full of lice, and then we had to use all sorts of chemicals to get rid of the lice there, because lice is what spreads the typhus fever. So anyhow, that went on for about a year. And then there was the Rawalpindi conspiracy case, in which Rawalpindi conspiracy, which I don't know exactly, but there was General Akbar there, Faiz Ahmed Faiz was there, Major Isaac was there. And these are the known figures. Major Isaac was from the army. Faiz Ahmed Faiz, of course, was leftist. And and then there was this Colonel Latif Afghani.
Sorry, just one second. Let's start from where you said the Rawalpindi conspiracy and the people that were involved.
General Akbar, he wanted to make a whole sort of an army, and they say he wanted to क्या कहते हैं उसको, to carry out a coup, which I don't know, because we knew him, we knew his wife, and he had 2 small children, but he was sent to jail, Hyderabad jail, and where, by the way, Faiz Ahmed Faiz wrote his best poetry. One of them was when he was in jail, and it's a very famous couplet that is, रात बाकी थी अभी जब सरे बाली आकर चांद ने मुझसे कहा जाग सहर आई है. जाग इस शब्द जो तेरा हिस्सा थी, जाम के लब से तहे जाम उतर आई है. What beautiful similes. The night is finished, it's morning, you better get up. रात बाकी थी अभी जब सरे बाली आकर चांद ने मुझसे, सरे बाली means I could see it, and चांद ने मुझसे कहा जाग सहर आई है. Anyhow, he was a communist. He was awarded a Lenin Award in Moscow, and he was a confirmed communist, and you can see it in his own poetry. One of them is Gar mujhe iska, he's addressing the masses or the laborer, and he says Gar mujhe iska yaqeen ho mere हमदम mere dost कि मेरे गीत तेरे दुख का मदावा होंगे, मेरी दिलजोई से मिट जाएगी, मेरी दिलजोई तेरे माथे की शिकन, तेरे सीने की जलन, गीत गाता रहूं तेरी खातिर. If I could only do it, I would do it. In that he's addressing the laborers. And then of course this PWNG was, we had to go to, coming back to PWNG, Begum Liaqat Ali Khan was a brigadier, she was our commandant. And then Begum Mrs. Yusuf Haroon was the colonel in command. And then I think Nusrat Bhutto was in it. Nusrat Haroon was definitely in it from here. We had a separate, ours was a platoon in Pindi, and we were the best. Because you see, GHQ was there, General Headquarters. And before that, I told Mariam that Rawalpindi was the headquarter of the Northern Command during the World War II. So it was a very important cantonment in Pindi, because you see, it was closest to, now how was it close to Burma? No, Pindi, Burma. I don't know why, but it was. And General Auchinleck, who was the commander of the Northern Command, he had his headquarters there. So we inherited the headquarters from them, and then it became general headquarters of the army. So it was very well kept. It was very clean, very nice. Not the old city, but the cantonment was very clean. So the atmosphere was peaceful, and it was something to do. There was lots to do. Then, of course, the colleges and the schools opened. Then we went back to our studies. And then my sister became, this Rawalpindi conspiracy case had General Akbar and Major Ishaq and Colonel Latif Afghani. Now, Colonel Latif Afghani's sister, who died just about 15 days ago, Miss Meher Khan, she was our commander of the platoon. And she was removed after the brother was sent to jail, so she had to leave PWNG because she was a part of his family. So my sister became the commander, Major Raul Qamar Imam. So she became, and I remained a sergeant all my life. For the 2-3 years that I was there, I suppose I was too... we and this Meher Khan's youngest sister, Mahira, who died in California about 2 years back, poor thing. We were the life and soul of the platoon. There were about 30 women. So, but we were the ones who would do all sorts of pranks, and we were put under guard. We were locked into to rooms, quarter guard kehlata tha. We were locked into the rooms, and the whole platoon went on they went on strike that we will not do anything until Mahira and Abeeda come out. So that, we were that sort of, the gundas of the platoons. So anyhow, that was all very fun. A lot of, we enjoyed every moment of it. And there was so much to be done. 51, then, I personally started working because there were very few trained people, you see. I mean, the tragedy was that such few people were trained or were even educated to administer a country which had no previous record of being everything had been taken away from us. They had it, Indians had it there and then. They inherited everything, including their administration. It was very much intact. And I don't know whether unfortunately, but in the army, there was no one above the rank of brigadier who was a Muslim. They were all British, including the commander-in-chief. And that's, I think my theory is that's one reason why we couldn't capture Kashmir at that time, because General Gracie was very biased. So about our, now this is, then after I started working in Radio Pakistan in the evening, I used to read the local news, because they were there, I think this is about 53, 52. In the morning, I used to go to school. In the evening, I used to go and announce it there. There was this expedition which was going to Gasher Broom. Some peak called Gasher Broom, which I'm sure has been renamed. I don't know which one it was. But I had to be there and read a half an hour's bulletin to guide that and also to give the local news. Acha, phir uske baad...
Wasn't this a really radical idea at the time? How did people feel about it?
Oh my God, you don't know. Everyone from every walk of life came forward. Okay. And we had to, all we had to, were given was uniforms and transport. No money. Mind you, because there wasn't any money. So my daughter is going to look for those pictures and she'll show them. It was a proper, part of the army, and we had to go for a parade every morning at 7 o'clock till 9. We had to stay there, and then we were sort of distributed to different offices where we could do whatever, whatever little we could. And 1 o'clock we were free. So it was a proper part of the army, but not taken very seriously, I'm sorry. Although we did a lot of work, but we were never taken very seriously. So, and you'd be surprised to know that even this Masi class, I remember there was one Vilayat Jan who couldn't even speak Urdu properly. She was also a part of PWNG, and she loved wearing, and the trucks had to be sent, trucks or whatever, the officers had some sort of wagons, and the lower ranks were collected in these 303 was a rifle. We were given rifle training also, but that was about all. And, the trucks would go around to all the mehallas and all the outskirts. Everywhere you could find they could come, who could come, was brought to the parade ground, which was in Lal Kurti. And I think it was Jawans, Jawans are the soldiers, their gymnasium. It was a huge hall where we had to go for, and of course outside it had a lot of land where we had to go on parade, and then of course, we had, sometimes we were sent for rifle training, but most of the time we did worked in the offices or as nurses, or what else did we do? Mostly as nurses and dispatch riders, mind you. One of my very good friends, she had that huge, what do you call it? This something Harley Hudson or something, huge motorcycle. Harley Davidson. She's a tall woman, and she used to take messages from one place to another. I mean, she was on the road in her uniform. So, I mean, can you imagine in the present day, and she had to take messages because telephones, no, these were secret messages that had to be sent from one office to another. So it had to be taken by hand. So she was Harley Davidson, you said. So she used to ride a Harley Davidson. And the news that used to get in from the front, so that had to be decoded and it had to be, I mean, without our understanding what it was, it had to be written down and given to the officer. They decoded it and they acted accordingly. So then, of course, it petered out in the way that, there was not much to do. And then, basically, Ms. Khan was the moving spirit. She said that these people, when they go back, they should have something in hand for these 2-3 years that they have spent. So they were trained for, I think, nursing, mostly nursing, and then slightly educated ones were given the shorthand typing courses so that they could work in the offices as secretaries. And then some of them were given short courses as junior teachers so that they could go and teach in schools. These are the slightly educated ones. Mind you, the locals, lots of locals were there also in Pindi. It was not only the outsiders. So after that, then I personally started working for Zarina Fabrics, which was the first, you can say, interior decoration firm or, organization. And this was started by an American lady who was married to a Pakistani psychiatrist, Dr. Habib. So she started this, and I started working for her. Then when she came to know, then the capital shifted to Pindi, so she asked me to go and open a branch in my own house. So I was working there, then I got engaged, then I got married, then I started having children. That was the end of it.
You said something about Radio Pakistan. Can you tell us something about like the local culture there at the time? What sorts of songs were played, that sort of thing?
I think there was one, there were two local singers. One of them was Zubaida Khanum, who died, poor thing. And there was another one, I think. And they sang in mostly Putwari, which is the language of Potohar. So they sang in Putwari. And in the beginning when we came, so we thought that it would be a very liberal atmosphere, which we found that because the Pathans from Peshawar and the surrounding areas had come down to Pindi. So we had to wear burqas at that time. We couldn't go out without wearing burqas. But that was about all. There were cinemas open and Indian films being shown and Indian music being played. There used to be theatres about the war in Kashmir and the suppression of Kashmiris and all that. So that used to take place. And there was Halqa-e Arbab-e-Zawq, which was formed within about 2-3 years of Pakistan. My sister, who's older than me, and she lives in Lahore, she started writing short stories. So she started contributing to Mahino. There was this magazine, which quite a prestigious magazine. And in Radio Pakistan, I was trying to remember his name, Sultan Sahab, Ansar Sahab. He used to correct the pronunciation. For instance, I thought the word was trophy, and he said, no, it's trophy. So the pronunciation had to be correct because I had to read the read the news in English. And the atmosphere was quite relaxed. You see, don't forget that this was something that we were in the process of making. So whenever you're going forward, making something, you have something to do. So the atmosphere is always very conducive to one, cohesion between the people, because you have to work together, and then you have to invent on the way. So, it was very exciting. And then, of course, by and by, we started realizing that we had been, as they say, taken for a ride in the way that we had been given very little when we, in the form of the government, because there was not much money, there was hardly anything, very little money. Then Nizam of Hyderabad sent a lot of money to Pakistan. At that time, I think it was 2 crores. And then, of course, Junagadh acceded to Pakistan, which is in Mavanadar, just below Kutch. Then they brought in their money. So, and then Agha Khan gave, the late Agha Khan gave a lot of money. So Qaid-e-Azam had the type of personality who once he said something, it was done. There was no question about it. Because I'll tell you one incident of his integrity and his lawfulness in following the law. Because he was a very eminent lawyer and a man of great principles. This I was told by my brother who was in the Navy, that Admiral Ehsan, who became the Commander-in-Chief of the Navy later, was his ADC. And he was going to see Begum Bhopal in Malir. And there was a railway crossing there. Even now, I think it is there. So there was a railway crossing, and this Admiral Ehsan, who must have been a lieutenant or something at that time, he jumped out the car because the door was closed. He jumped out of the car and he wanted to go and open the door. So Qaid-e-Azam called him back and he says, "Why did you get out?" So he says, "I wanted to open the door for you to pass." He said, "No, I'm going to wait here till the goods train passes. I'm a citizen of Pakistan. If I don't follow the law, who else is going to?" Now, this incident was related by Admiral Ehsan to my brother, who was also very junior to him. And he also became the ADC to Ghulam Muhammad and to Iskandar Mirza later. So that is the type of person that he was, Qaid-e-Azam.
Okay, moving back, I remember one of the notable things you said was that you told us about why you moved late to Pakistan, right? As in you came in October rather than August. Like most of the refugees. So can you just give us a few more details?
Well, you see, the thing is, first my father wanted to, had sent one of his partners here so that he could, to Pindi. We always wanted to come to Pindi. Although my great uncle was the deputy secretary who had retired from the Legislative Assembly of India, but Mr. Liaqat-e Khan called him and he says, "We need you and you have to come." So he was in Karachi. But he also wanted to come and settle in Pindi because it was a quieter place. I don't know why they decided, but we are going to. So my father sent his partner with some money to come and establish some sort of a business here so that we could come and join. So we did intend coming, but not so quickly, not so soon. But then as I told Mariam, that, we started hearing of people that we knew being killed. So then we were living in an area which was surrounded by the Air Force colony. So it was safer. My uncle was in the Air Force and he had a house. So we moved to his house, my family, my mother, my grandmother, my brother, my sister, and two of my uncles, I think. We all moved to his house. And he said that you have to be on the standby. The moment there is a plane available, you have to go. And one morning at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, he rang up and he said, "Just get out of the house because there are 6 surrounding the area and they are going to be any time on Lodhi Road. So get out with whatever." And then he came over because transport itni nahi thi. So he came over in his car. And I remember my little cousin, who was about a few months old, my aunt was bathing him and she just wrapped him in the towel. And we came out with my mother had this jewelry under her pillow all the time. She picked that up and we just rushed out. He took one turn and then he took another turn. Then we were put in the officers' mess. And from there we were transferred to Palam Airport. And there we waited for about, that plane which was supposed to, we were to hurry for, already had left because, they didn't wait. They said, "Whoever comes in, just come in and we'll take you to Pindi." It was a very desperate time at that time. And then we had to wait for about 10 days, 12 days in the barracks near Palam Airport. And we were on the 2nd story, so we could see all around Delhi where the Muslim villages were being burnt. That was the only thing I saw myself, because there'd be, fire and smoke coming out of all the surrounding villages. And then one morning, I don't know, after about 10 days or so, I told Mariam that, it was a Dakota, which is a cargo ship, a cargo plane. And it had no seats. Because you see, you just put everything in it and brought it over. It was cargo ships like cargo ship. It was a cargo plane. So we sat on the floor, and I think it took us about 1.5, 2 hours to reach Pindi. That's all.
Okay. Can you tell us something about how you felt, like on 14th August? What was the atmosphere like? Did you witnessed?
On the 1st or 14th of August?
August when you found out that Pakistan had...
We were still in Delhi.
Okay.
So what happened was that on the 14th of August, I told Mariam there was this place called Parda Bagh, where all the Muslim women gathered and they marched to the Jame Masjid. I don't know how much distance there is. I think my daughter can tell you because she lives in Delhi. So we marched there, and then the whole of the courtyard was full of women wearing green dupattas and shouting Qaid-e-Azam, Zindabad, Pakistan milke rahega. And 14th, Pakistan mil gaya, and all that, very patriotic slogans. So a few of my friends and I, we went up to the Minara. I told Mariam that. And we took up the flag, which was just a green dupatta tied to a pole. And when we reached up, we realized that we didn't have anything to tie the flag with. So one of the girls, we used to have 2 plats at that time. So one of the girls took out her 2 parandas. And then she, we tied it. And of course, there was such an applause from down below because this minaret is quite high. And we waved from there, and the green dupatta was flying in the air. And there was so much of shouting and slogans and applause and claps. And that was it. The next day was the Indian Independence Day. And I remember in our school, out of the 1500s, maybe 1600 girl students, there were just about 70 or 80 Muslim girls. So on the 15th of August, every student was in the quadrangle singing the national anthem, and this Tiranga was going up on our school building. And just a bunch of these little schoolgirls, we sat in the veranda, we just didn't take part in it. Mind you, being surrounded by all these Hindus, but that was our right. We just sat there, we didn't salute the Tiranga, we didn't take part in the national song, Janaman Gan Adhinayak, Janaman Gan Adhinayak, Yayo He, which is, I think it's Sanskrit. So we just sat there in the veranda and watched the whole thing, and we didn't take part in it. That I thought was looking back, I thought it was very courageous.
Very courageous, but were you treated any differently? Did you notice did anyone make you uncomfortable?
No, not in the least. Not in the least. Even during the, when these, everyone knew that we were going to vote for Pakistan, but there was no enmity, there was no kichar uchaloing on each other. It was very amicable. We knew that they were Hindus, they knew we were Muslims, and we were going to go to Pakistan. But there was no enmity there. In fact, I was telling Mariam that our functions, like Eid Milan or Bakra Eid or whatever it was, used to be so looked forward to. Because you see, we just like all Muslims, we are such a tragedy, we are such show-offs. So, our functions used to be so much better. There were 80 girls, and here were there about 1,400. They couldn't make their functions as good, their Durga Puja or whatever it was. Their functions were absolutely flat as compared to ours. And then we used to have plays like, there was a play in which, why was it staged in Lady Upin? I don't know. But it was about Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal, which the Muslim girls put up. I think it must have been one of the Eid functions. So we had a play there, and the whole school was invited, and we served the best meal. So they really looked forward to it. So there was no enmity whatsoever. There was these are the science students, and these are the domestic science students and all that, the sort of domestic science. And, our education, Mariam, was, now that I look back, it was so comprehensive. In the domestic science, we were taught first aid, home nursing, sewing, cutting, cooking. What else was there? Everything that our practical things that we had done. And bandages, I remember, on a broken limbs, how to apply, that is a part of nursing. And another thing that I must tell you, there was our favorite teacher. We all just sort of thought that she was God on earth. Her name was Sushila Hukku. Hukku is a Kashmiri Brahmin caste. And somehow, I don't know who made up the story, her father was the Prime Minister of Mysore state, which was a big state in those days. And she lived there in the utter simplicity, always white sari, and in the winter she used to have a green shawl. Absolutely so frugal. She had used to have middle parting and a bun at the back. Very beautiful. Savli, magar very beautiful. And very staunch Hindu. So much so, I mean, she was the type of person who had her own lady cook who came in to the teacher's hostel, and she used to make her food. So I'm sure she came from a good background. So, she was one person. Afterwards, we were told, because some of our friends from school had to go to this Red Fort, which was made into a refugee camp, where all the Muslims gathered. They were all, for their safety, they were all put there. So this Miss Hukku, who we thought was such a staunch Hindu, would you believe it? She had a cycle. And on that cycle, we were told afterwards that every girl that was in the school, she asked their parents, she got checks from them and withdrew all the money from the banks and brought it to, I mean, this was dangerous. And she went to all the banks and brought whatever money she could to, I mean, whoever could give her a check, she would go and have it cashed and bring it back to them.
You said you were in school and the time of 1946-47. So did you take part in any political activities, anything like that?
No. Well, this was, I mean, we were very political in the way that, very much for Pakistan, full of enthusiasm for Pakistan. But at 13, 14, you can't take part in this. The march was the only thing that we took part in. That was about all. And none of the family was in politics either, because you see, my granduncle with whom we were staying, we were living, he was in the government, in the British government, so he couldn't. And the family, it really didn't matter at that time. Everyone knew that we are going to get Pakistan. But most of the tragedy happened in Bihar. It started Bengal, and then of course it's spread all over. And equally, I think it was equally tragic on both the sides. And then the house, I think one of the questionnaires is that where, our house was called Ranjit Tawas on it was a marble plaque. And on that, it was written Ranjit Tawas, which my father afterwards changed to Aeraf, which means way from this earth to heaven, in between. Aeraf. Aeraf in Layla fi Qurayshin. Alafihim. No, that's not. Aeraf is an Arabic word. So he put a wooden plate, name plate on that. So what we found, I mean, this was just dead opposite the Company Bagh gate. And it was a two-storied house, beautiful tile floors and everything. According to that time, I think it must have belonged to someone called Ranjit Singh or someone, I don't know. But what we found there was some furniture and tins full of achar, aam ka achar. And we just loved it. And you see, since we didn't have any income, we used to have parathas made because there was a lot of ghee. So atta was available. So what we did was that I think day in and day out we had achar and parathas. But it was all fun. And then, what we found there was in the cupboards, a few cupboards, they were because they were, at that time there was no built-in cupboard system, but there used to be there were 2 or 3 built-in cupboards. And out of that poured out mounds of these haversacks, they are called. Haversacks are something like, you people wear these days to carry your things at the back. So they were called haversacks. I think someone called Mr. Haver must have made, and they were army. So they must have been supplies to the army or something. But we found, because we found lots and lots of them. And of course their pots and pans were so different to ours. You know, they were quite different. For instance, there was something called karmandal, what we call a balti. So they used to call it karmandal, and it was round and it was heavy, and I think that it was used for milking the cows or something, I don't know. But I remember distinctly that there were a lot of haversacks, and what else did we find? Bust. Just a few things. Then, of course, there was bazaars were not open, but things were, little auctions were held out of the house, the cloth that we got out of these houses. And so we had exhibitions and auctions where people could buy things and make use of them.
I wanted to ask you, going back, about the refugee camp at Wharton Airport. Did you see it yourself?
No,
You know.
I heard about it. You see, because it was in Lahore and we were in Pindi. But I believe the Salma Tasadduq Hussain that I talked to you about, and Begum, you must mention her. In fact, just about last week, her son's interview was out in the Dawn. I'll see if I can get it for you. So, Begum Nuru Sabah, she was, she belonged to, her father belonged to one of those small states that you have, lots in 50 or 500 or 600 of them in India. So, she was the one who led us from Pardabagh to. And I heard a lot about Begum Nur Sabah. And here it was Begum Salma Tasadduq Hussain and Begum Jahara Shahnawaz. She was a member of the Legislative Assembly, mind you, in India, pre-partition. So her relatives and people who were here in Lahore, mind you, even here and in Pindi, the well-to-do people were Sikhs and Hindus. The Muslims were lower, like Sindh. Even in Sindh, there were very few educated. Of course, Begum Nusrat Harun was here. These are the ladies that I heard of at that. And then Mrs. What was his name? Hidayatullah. Mrs. Hidayatullah, these were the first. And from East Pakistan, there were lots of ladies, like Khaja Nazimuddin's family. In fact, we had a wing of PWNG in East Pakistan. And Tahira Hashmat and Bilqis. Khaja Nazimuddin's daughters or Shahabuddin? No, they were Khaja Nazimuddin's daughters. So they were in PWNG. And the most interesting thing is that the Shah of Iran wanted to visit Pakistan. I think there must have been some sort of that I'll come and see what is needed and I'll give it to you. That must have been in the background. But he came and visited Karachi. And Begum Liaqat decided that the PWNG was going to give him a guard of honor. So we were out in Malir. We came from Pindi, and these Tahira and Bilqis and Hashmat, they came from Dhaka. And there was a local platoon here. And Saida, I think you must be knowing her, Saida Hamid. You heard of Faiz Isa, the one who, Faiz Isa, he's a lawyer. Qazi Isa's son, Qazi Isa was from Balochistan. So his mother's older sister, I think she's alive, yes, Aziza Hamid, her name was. She is a small person, and she was the one, we had our own band, of course, the women's band, mind you, and she was the one who was carrying the largest drummer, and she was almost hidden behind that drum. So we had a march past for the Shah of Iran, and that was in Malir, again in barracks. We lived in barracks. And
you said that you were a sub-editor of Star newspaper, right? So can you tell us a little about what that was like, were there a lot of restrictions on the press, that sort of thing?
No restrictions.
No restrictions?
There weren't so many factions at that time. Restrictions only come with factions.
Okay.
So they weren't. All that, and not that it was that sensational as it is now, but everything that was happening everywhere. This is during the Iran-Iraq war, that lasted for 8 years. That was the time, at the beginning of that, I was the sub-editor in Star. And I remember telling Mansoori Saab, I had to read all the papers and then, see what we could print in our, that was an eveninger. So there was a news in one of the, I think, Ehan or one of the British papers. No, the British couldn't have done it. But in one of the papers, American maybe, it was said that children as young as 13 are going to war. So I told Mansoori Saab, look at this. He says, give it as the headline, for heaven's sake. Children fighting Iran-Iraq war. Irani children fighting the war. So it was given as the headline. Because it was absolutely sensational and it was very tragic. And you know that Bahishte Zahra is full of, Mariam should know, it's full of, I don't know, millions of people died there. So that was the time when I was the editor, sub-editor there. But then, they started having the deadline had to be at about 4 in the morning, then it became 3 in the morning. So I had my children, I said, no, I don't think I can come. During the day I can come and work for you, so I left that. Then I started teaching at PSCC, where I've taught English for 23 years. And now they want me back, but I don't want to go.
Another significant thing that you gave us was, you told us that you know about Zulfikar Ali Bhutto's hanging, right? So were you actually there, or did you hear about it?
No, he was hung in Pindi.
Hanged in Pindi, okay. So can you tell us something about that?
My God. We were praying. All the, everyone in Karachi was praying that this stupid man would, send him away, give him a life imprisonment. And then I remember I was having a bath and my 12-year-old son, who's mashallah now in Toronto and he's 44. So he came in and he banged on the door and he said, Amma maar diya, Amma unko maar diya, unne phansi chadha di, and he was banging his head against the door. Then of course I at once went to 70 Clifton and saw all these people there, and we read the Quran and everyone was cursing Zia left, right and center. Because it was a political murder. There are people who have done much worse who are here around. And in spite of his ego, in spite of all his evil intentions, not evil intentions I would say, but evil company that he kept then, and he was an egomaniac like Hitler. But in the process, I still believe he would have taken the country somewhere. Because he was a man of great stature. Internationally. Not like our... Don't say this, but...
Off record. One of the things that you mentioned was the Rawalpindi conspiracy. Can you give us a little more details about that? How you found out about it, what happened, and what happened after?
I don't exactly recollect why it was. I think it was some sort of an uprising in a very small part of the army, where General Akbar led, and he had a few officers with him. And they said that they wanted to overturn the government. But they were definitely put in jail. In Hyderabad jail, I think they were there for about 3 years. Major Ishaq, I remember Major Ishaq, General Akbar, and Faiz Ahmad Faiz, and who else was there? I really don't remember much.
And what was the public response to this?
The public didn't know much about it. No, there was no public response as far as I remember. Because I think this was some sort of I'm not sure. I think maybe these officers were getting too big for their feet. And the government wanted them out of the way. It was partly that, and I really can't tell you much about it. But I think if you go through not that it would be there very easily available, but Unfortunately, I don't remember. I mean, I have been to General Akbar's house. I've met his wife, and who was Begum Shah Nawaz's daughter, by the way, Begum Jahara Shah Nawaz, who was the, they were very aware, those people, and they were very forward-looking. I mean, imagine a lady from Punjab, a Muslim lady from Punjab, being a member of the Legislative Assembly of pre-partition India. We had that. Like Sarah, what was her name? And Begum, Mrs. Aruna Asif Ali. Aruna was a Hindu. She was married to Mr. Asif Ali, who was again leftist. Then there was, I'm sure your mother would be able to tell you, or had your father been alive, Banne Bhai, Sajjad Zahir. Justice Ali Zahir ke bete the na, Banne Bhai Sajjad Zahir. He was one of the people who was in this. Sajjad, Justice Sajjad Zahir was a very prominent lawyer. I mean, he was justice in Lucknow. His son, Sajjad Zahir, was a leftist. He was a communist. So he was also in the Pindi conspiracy. I don't know why he migrated, poor thing. He died in Bahawalpur jail. He was a writer and a poet, and man of conscience.
This audio has been taken from the Citizens Archive of Pakistan's Oral History Project.